Hello and welcome to another episode of Spooky Repot with me. If you're new here, my name is Fern, and in this series we combine potting houseplants with some spooky and strange stories. Thank you so much for being here. I love that there are other people that are interested in this type of content. You guys were so kind on the last episode that I released, so thank you so much. And if you are new here, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any videos. So last time we repotted a couple of my Gloriosum, and I did a kind of like spooky setup planter. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it for you. In today's episode, I went a little bit DIY and painted a little ghost planter, and we potted up my Syngonium albo. So this is what I'm going to be working on while you listen to the stories today. I'm obviously not an artist, so forgive me, but this was still really fun to do regardless. And I actually have some other ideas of like spooky pot things that I can do that I'll probably be making in future episodes. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be to paint on that pot. I've never done it before, but yeah, I think I need better brushes or something because it was a bit of a struggle. Anyways, without further ado, I hope that you enjoy the stories. Oh, also, thank you so much to everybody who has submitted a story to me. I appreciate that so much. Again, I will put my email on the screen and have it down in the description box if you do have a strange story that you would like to submit. And I did want to say that while the majority of these stories are paranormal, I would also love to hear like really anything that's strange. Like, you know, we don't have to be limited just to ghosts and paranormal. Like, honestly, any strange occurrences, conspiracy theories, aliens, maybe a true crime that's happened in your town or something like that. I want to hear it all. So yeah, and thank you so much again to everyone who has sent in a story. Story number 1. As a child, I would sleep with my door cracked open because I had a silly fear that I would get stuck in my room if there was an emergency. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason other than the fact that I had a feeling. I looked out of my door into the hallway and I saw a tall man with dark hair and a black shirt walk towards the front of the house. I thought it was my dad, so I got up and looked down the hallway, but no lights were on, and I suddenly got really scared and ran into my room. I had never told anyone about this because I wasn't sure what I had seen. Several years later, my mom and I were talking about ghosts, and she said she had seen a tall man with dark hair and a dark shirt walk past the door from the corner of her eye when we lived in our old house. She had called out to my dad and then realized she was home alone. Upon hearing this, my brother chimed in that he had seen a similar figure in the same house when he was younger. I was completely shocked that I wasn't the only one that had seen him, and with almost identical descriptions. We have since moved away, and I only ever saw him once. Story number 2. This is something that happened to my mom and I when I was young. We rented out an old house for about a year. My mom said she would notice floorboards creaking and doors moving on their own, but always ignored it. Until one night, she went to sleep and woke up in a field of tall grass. A woman dressed in a long skirt and tall boots walked in the grass in front of her until she was almost out of view. And then suddenly she was standing right in front of my mom. She said to her, "You who are in my place, hear me. "My name is Margaret." And then the woman reached out and grabbed my mom, and she woke up screaming. As the day went on, she chalked it up to be a bad dream. But later on that night, as my mom was walking me up the stairs to bed, I looked up and said, "Mommy, who's that lady in the hallway?" We ended up not re-signing our lease and moving out shortly after. Story number 3. This happened to me when I was around 10. We were living in an older home and had been living there for about 8 years. Our basement always gave me this weird, eerie feeling that I can't really describe, and my room and bathroom was down in the basement, but my brother and I shared them. I decided to take a shower one night, so I grabbed a towel and went into the bathroom. During my shower, I kept hearing someone calling my name, so I would constantly stop the shower and poke my head out to hear more clearly, but I never heard my name being called when I would stop the shower, so I continued. After I was finished, I hung out in the bathroom, still in my towel. I always bend over and put my head down so I can brush the back of my hair, and when I whipped back up, there was a black, super tall figure behind me in the mirror. I remember gasping super loud and dropping my hairbrush. When the hairbrush hit the floor, the light turned off and the entire light came out of the ceiling and shattered all over the floor. I screamed and stepped back, stepping on a huge piece of glass, cutting open my foot. When I tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. I stood there, screaming with my foot cut open and using all of my strength to open the door, but it wouldn't open. There wasn't even a lock on the door. After what felt like forever, my brother easily opens up the door. I ran out of the bathroom crying and bleeding everywhere. I ended up being taken to the hospital and getting 13 stitches in my foot. A couple days later, my brother came to me upset and said, "I used a Ouija board in the basement the day before you cut open your foot." He showed me that the board was hidden in the bathroom, under the sink. After that, I refused to go into the basement and never went into my room until we moved. My brother still apologizes to me 9 years later, and he's terrified of ever messing with a Ouija board again. No one in my family, except for me and my brother, believed that the Ouija board was the reason I went through that incident. It still haunts me and my brother to this day. Story number 4. So this one takes place in Seattle. I love that this person included that. I just think it's really interesting to hear what part of the world these stories happened in. Okay. I was renting an old house with 2 roommates, and I had a few strange experiences while living there. Like hearing footsteps walking up the stairs, but no one was home, and feeling like someone was in the room with me. One day, I was arriving home from work. I always came in through the back door, while my roommates often used the front door. There was an elderly woman standing in the backyard who introduced herself to me as our landlady. She apologized that she didn't give notice that she'd be there visiting, but explained that her visit wasn't planned. She told me she had grown up in this house and that if it was okay with me, she would love to see it one more time. I didn't even hesitate and invited her in. We toured the house. She explained that the house was built in 1911. Parentheses, she was right. And shared memories about her childhood with me. My roommate's cat walked through the living room, and I was super nervous because it was in our lease to not have pets. But the landlady told me it was totally fine and things like that didn't matter to her. She then asked me if I ever felt her parents' spirits, because they had both passed away in the house, in the room next to mine. I told her yes, that I had heard someone walking around and felt energies, or like someone was home even when I was the only one there. She told me that they were good spirits and meant us no harm, which I trusted and agreed with. She told me she lived in California now and that this house meant a lot to her and she was grateful to be able to visit. This is the last part I remember, because I don't recall her leaving or saying goodbye. This happened over the weekend, and the next week we got a call from our property manager saying that the owner of the home had passed away where she lived in California the week before, and that we wouldn't be able to renew our lease so the family could properly deal with selling the home. I can't be completely certain, but I'm almost positive I met our landlady after she had already passed. Story number 5. When I was 22, I went on a road trip from Germany to Turkey with my boyfriend and his family. The 4 of us were traveling by car for 3 days, which is still kind of common for some people with Turkish roots. 2 days in, we finally crossed the border to Turkey and decided to take a rest for the night sleeping in the car. I am a sleepwalker, but what happened was out of the ordinary, even for me. I can only remember dreaming about a figure reaching in through my window and stabbing me with a screwdriver. When I woke up, I had an excruciating headache and found myself alone in the car with all doors flung open except for mine. I came to find out that I had screamed at the top of my lungs and banged my head into the window and interior of the vehicle. No one was able to wake me, so the family decided to exit the car. Needless to say, no one wanted to share rooms with me after that. When we arrived at my boyfriend's grandparents' house where we were staying for the next 2 weeks, I was asked to join them and my boyfriend's mother in the cozy kitchen. They explained to me that the mother used to have the same nightmares when she was the same age as me. They told me she was possessed by a jinn, a supernatural creature stemming from Islamic mythology and theology. She was supposedly haunted by the jinn for several months until she attacked her father and herself, also with a screwdriver. I have to mention that I am in no way religious, but still my blood froze in that moment. However, I could collect myself and convince them that I was just sleepwalking, and the screwdriver part must have been a coincidence. The nightmares, including a dark figure watching and trying to persuade me to harm myself or others, continued for the next 3 days, and the family became more and more frustrated with me and my rationalizing of the incidents. After numerous talks, I agreed to the grandfather praying for me in a private, separate room. Mind you, I didn't understand his Arabic prayers back then, and I was not prepared to have a bowl of water dumped into my face when I agreed, but I let him do it so he could have his peace of mind. The nightmares stopped that night. I'll let y'all decide whether that was a coincidence as well. When my boyfriend and I moved in together, a book with a collection of prayers appeared on my bedside table each time his mother visited. It kind of creeped me out a bit, but I also appreciated her efforts to protect me. Story number 6. My dad is a very logical person who has a hard time believing what he can't see. Therefore, him insisting that he was visited by a ghost as a young adult is one of the scariest things I have ever heard. The story is his, not mine, but I will do my best to tell it with the amount of details he would. When my dad was around 20, He lived alone in an old house that had been passed down through generations in his family. The house was very remote, with no streetlights around it, and only a gravel walkway leading up to the front door. One night, when he was in bed trying to go to sleep, he heard footsteps on the gravel outside. He heard them coming closer and closer to the house, and eventually he heard the front door open and shut. He was totally sure he had locked the door before he went to bed, and the sound of it opening made him freeze in fear. He heard the footsteps walking over the old floorboards in the hallway, up the stairs, and toward his bedroom door. When he heard the bedroom door open, he did not dare to open his eyes out of fear of what he might see. The footsteps came closer to his bed until he could feel something hovering over him and breathing over his ear. And then it went away, just like that. The next morning, he checked the front door. It was locked. He told himself that it had to have just been a bad dream, and tried not to think about it anymore. Later that day, he went to visit his grandma. She was very old and sometimes talked about weird things, like how she had been talking to my father's cousins the other day, even though they had been dead for years. My dad and his family saw it as a sign of dementia. But when he went to visit her that day, she turned to him as soon as he walked in the room and said very clearly, "You had a visitor last night, didn't you?" After that, he had a hard time convincing himself that what he had experienced that night wasn't real. Story number 7. About 6 years ago, I was still living at home, but worked a few towns over at a craft store that had since shut down. I usually took late afternoon shifts and would close the store a few times a week, oftentimes getting home at around 10 to 10:30 p.m. I took a lot of back roads on my way home. My car was too rickety and old to go on the highway, so there were only a few spots of light from lampposts every few miles. I was paranoid a lot of the times on these trips home, but this time was different. The back end of my road veers into a slight turn from the main road, creating a fork. On the last stretch of my drive home, I was approaching this slight right when I noticed something several yards away. There was the vivid shape of a boy, maybe 12 years old, sitting on the ground in the forked corner of my road. His arms were falling lazily at his sides, and his legs were bent but outstretched in front of him. He wore a t-shirt, jeans, shoes, and had short, light brown hair. He sat in a way where I could only see the back right side of him, and it looked like he was staring into the woods a few feet in front of him. The situation seemed suspicious, but I began to slow down to see if I could do anything. When my car paused a few feet away from him, his head suddenly snapped to me. It was unnatural how quickly his head had turned. I didn't see his neck move or turn to me. It was like the blink of an eye. When he did turn his head, there was no face. There was nothing but a flat, white surface of where details should have been. My whole body went cold. I stepped on the gas and drove all the way home, about 90 miles an hour without stopping. I remember feeling like this energy was in my back seat as I drove away, and I remember still seeing his shape in my rear view mirror under the streetlight. Once I got home, I ran inside and told my parents what I had seen. They called the police, but when they patrolled the street only minutes after, no one was there. I don't drive at night that often anymore, and I haven't driven past that corner at night in several years. . Alright, that was the last one. I hope that you guys enjoyed the stories in today's episode. I really loved all of them, and I was getting quite spooked while editing this video. If you enjoyed this spooky repot with me, please give it a thumbs up. That really, really helps me out. Also, leave a comment down below and make sure to share this video with your friends, share it on your Instagram story, wherever you can. I really, really appreciate your support. I look forward to chatting with you guys in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.